Hello, and welcome at last to our virtual Saturday Sampler program 2021. We've called the program Tree Farm Village because those are the quilts that you'll be making. If you've done Saturday Sampler for a while, I know you and I'm happy to see you. I hope I see you soon in real life when we can gather in groups again. If you're new to Saturday Sampler, welcome. I'm Jan. I'm the owner of Pennington Quilt Works, and I'll be your guide through the Saturday Sampler program. So let's get started. Okay, you're ready to go? We're going to take out the Start Here envelope, and what you'll find inside are some directions to make a practice little block. And the reason I'm doing this with you is because when you're making very small units, you have to be very accurate. And so I wanted to give you a little practice, making sure that you get the 1/4 inch seam that works right to give you the results that you need to get an accurate block. The first thing you'll notice is that there is a needle in here. I've given everyone a new needle. So if you haven't changed your needle recently, put this into your machine. This is a Microtex needle. It's a very fine, sharp point, and it works well for making an accurate seam. It pierces the fabric well, and so you'll be able to make a nice, straight, accurate seam with it. So we're going to be making this little block here that is a little strip piece block that will measure 6.5 inches when we're done. And that's what our subsequent blocks will measure. So let's take a look at how to do this. The first thing I'm going to do is, you see that there are 4 fabrics in your block pack, 2 that are blue, I think they're all blue, and then 2 that are neutral. And you're going to take one of the print fabrics and one of the neutral fabrics and put those right sides together like this. We're going to cut 2 2-inch strips this way from it to start making our blocks. And what I like to do is to trim off the right hand edge first. So I put it just a skinny little trim off here to make sure everything's nice and straight. So I'm trimming that there. I'm going to turn this to the other side. I'm right-handed, so I want the straight edge to be to my left. And I'm going to put the lines of my ruler, the 2-inch line right on this edge, and whatever line here, just so you're keeping everything nice and perpendicular. So I'm cutting a 2-inch strip. I'm going to move this away, move this over, and cut another 2-inch strip. So we're cutting these right sides together because that's exactly how we're going to be sewing them, and that way they're already set up for you to go. I also have you cutting these strips down to 6.5 inches. So you can actually, if you want to cut them all 4 at the same time, you can. I'm going to trim one end again. Open your blade. And this time I'm going to measure 6.5 inches. So I can easily put this ruler sideways, put the 6.5 inch line there, have some straight line along the bottom. I want to make sure they stayed nice and stacked. 6.5, and just cut that off there. Okay, I need to move to the sewing machine, so I'll be right back with you. So we're ready to start taking our first stitches, and this is sort of the point of doing our practice little block here, because I want to be sure that you are using the 1/4 inch that is required for you to get the size block that you need. A lot of times people say, well, I used a 1/4 inch. Well, you need to find the sweet spot on your machine that makes the 1/4 inch that then allows you to finish up with the size that you need. So I have a 1/4 inch foot here on my machine, and I find that with this machine and this thread, I can run the edge of the foot right along the very edge of the fabric and get a good seam that gives me what I need So you might have to experiment a little bit. Perhaps on your machine, the edge needs to be showing a little bit. On your machine, maybe it needs to be a little bit inside the foot. This one I think is pretty much right on the end. You know, sometimes your feet are a little bit different. Even your needle might be sitting in a little bit different spot on a machine. So you do have to find that real sweet spot there. So we're going to start sewing. And I'm going to follow it right along that edge. So when I'm looking at this, don't look at the needle, look at the edge. And you should really do one of these and then check the measurements against what it says on the instructions. I'm going to do 2 of them so that I'm being very confident in myself. So then I can put them together into the full block while I'm here at the machine, because we're not going to keep coming back to the machine each time. So there I am. Sometimes if you get going and you can get going fast, it can actually be good. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Now I'm back at the ironing mat here, and I'm going to press the seams toward the blue part, toward the darker part of my strips. So what I like to do first of all, whichever side you want the seam to be pressed toward, you put that on the top. So here I have the blue on the top because I want the seam to go in that direction. Before you open the seam, just press it just the way you sewed it. See how there's like little bumps in there? If I press it before I try to open, it'll smooth those out so that the seam and the turn that I get will be smoother when I open it up. So I press it that way first, and then open this up, and I kind of make sure with my fingers that it goes out as far as it can. Sometimes if you're having trouble with the size of your block, it's not the stitching, it's the pressing. So you want to be sure that's nice and open. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same with the other. Here is the other strip, blue side up, press the way it was stitched. And then I'm going to open, hot. If you're doing several of these, it's a good idea to do the flat way on several first and then go back and open so that you give them a chance to cool down. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm not moving the iron back and forth. All I'm doing is sort of forcing that seam to open as far as I can, the 2 pieces to open as far from each other as I can. Okay, now the question is, did they come out to be 3.5 inches? Let's see how we did. So, let's see. This one is a very nice 3.5 inches. And hopefully this one is too. Okay, so if yours aren't 3.5 inches, go back and try again. There's another whole set of practice pieces in your packet. And here this is the one where I pieced both of those together into a block, did the same thing, pressed with the dark side on the top. I pressed it that way, then pressed it from the front, and there's my 6.5 by 6.5 inch block. That's what you'll be doing every time with every block that we make. So be sure to get that seam allowance down to be as accurate for the result of your block as you possibly can. We'll be starting with block 1 very soon. Are you ready to start month 1? Let's go. So in your box, you had directions for the 3 blocks for month 1, so you need to have those out. And you need to have the 4 fabrics from which we'll be making 3 blocks. And you need to have some background fabric. Now, I told you we'd be using a 1/2 yard. to make the backgrounds for all the blocks, I actually like to cut mine down into some smaller pieces. So I cut my 18 inches of half yard into 9 inches, and then I cut that in half, and I even cut it in half again, so that I have small pieces just like what I have of the prints that are in there. Everything in your boxes for the prints will be 9 inches by 10 inches. And so that's what we'll be working from. So for month 1, we're going to be making this little evening star. Now, all of the blocks in month 1 have the flying goose arrangement to make star points. It's just the centers that are going to be different on each block. So this is what I'm just calling block 1A and 1B and 1C. They're all there together on one page. I also want to tell you, as you cut these all through the whole program, you're going to have extra fabric. You are not going to need that for other blocks, but you can certainly incorporate that into other blocks if you'd like to. We actually made all 12 blocks, each one of them from a different 4 fabrics. So, you'll have this left over. You really don't need to do anything with it, but just put it aside in case you do need it later. Okay, so we're going to start by cutting. And right here on the bottom of page 1 here for the first block, I have cutting for you. And I tell you to cut the background as a large square and 4 small squares. Now, this is the same for all 3 blocks. So if you'd like to cut it 3 times right now, that would be okay too. I have just one set here. You need to cut a medium-sized square for the middle. You can fussy cut those if you'd like. I have a little bicycle right there toward the middle. And then you need 4 of the star point fabrics cut to size that it shows you in the directions. The major thing we're going to learn about today is making flying geese units. So the flying goose unit is the piece that is going to make the star points. They are always twice as long as they are high. Ours are going to actually finish at 3 by 1.5. So to get started, you're going to take your piece of background, the large square that you've cut, and you will have all of the smaller star points and draw a line on the backs of those. Then you're going to line them up on the background so that the line is continuous from one side to the other. So it'll be just like this. Now, all of these directions are on page 2. They're even a little grayed area to give you the whole, all together, the whole thing about making the flying geese units. So I put these right sides together. The line goes from corner to corner, and they overlap in the middle. And then I'll be sewing them 1/4 inch from each side. So remember to use that 1/4 inch that you practiced on your practice sheet. After they're sewn, we're going to cut them right on the line that we drew. And what you end up with are 2 of these, what I call the heart-shaped pieces. So you're going to have 2 of those. And then to complete the flying geese, you're going to put another square on each of them. Again, it has a line going from the point to the center, so 1/4 inch on each side of the line. And can you see that when I cut those apart then, I have a flying goose unit there and one there. So each heart unit makes 2 flying geese, and we'll have a total of 4 of them. The next thing we need to do is to trim these down to the size. These were made a little oversized, and we're going to use the wing clipper to cut these down. As I was preparing this, I realized that I found the first mistake in my very carefully written directions, and that is I said to use the Tucker trimmer to cut it down, but instead we are actually using the wing clipper. That's what you really want to use, is the wing clipper. The way to get started on this is to remember to turn your piece that you've made so that the point actually points toward you. It's like it makes a V, so the point of the V is pointing towards you. And then we're going to use the Tucker trimmer to trim this down to 2.5 by 3 inches. And as I put the Tucker trimmer down, can you see that it's actually hanging past the 2 and past the 3.5? And that's what we want it to do. The V shape is going right into the V shape of our fabric, and although that line should line up with your seam line. So then we're going to cut on the right and on the top. These directions, by the way, are right inside the wing clipper package. I'm going to turn it the other way, and this time I'm going to put the 3.5 and the 2 line, here's the 2, here's the 3.5, right on the edges of my fabric. And then trim the right, trim the top, get those little slivers out of there, and then I have the perfect 2.5 by 3 inch piece that I need to construct the final block. So then to construct the block, you're going to take the center piece. You're going to take the 4 flying geese, lay these all out next to your sewing machine. And then you've got the 4 small background squares that go in the center. I'm sorry, that go in the corners. So then what we'll be doing is sewing this to this, this to this, this to this, so that you've got 3 rows. I can look at this and I can see that if I press these outward, and these inward, when I put the 3 rows together, they will nest very nicely. We are ready to make block 1B. B is also an evening star using the flying geese as the star points. This time it has a center that's called a square and a square. We're going to be making that with corner flips. So be sure to pick out the right color that you're doing, tree or farm or village, and then you'll be able to find the fabrics that you need. These are the 3 fabrics that I would need in village. Now you've already cut some of this when you used month 1, so you're going to have smaller pieces. When you did block A, you're going to have smaller pieces left, but these will be the 3 fabrics that I need for block B. So you see, although you have 4 fabrics each month, they are used in different combinations. So we're going to start with the cutting here, and you can follow along. What I have are in the background, I have the 1 big square for the flying geese, the 4 small for the corners, and then I have 4 of the medium squares to make the flying geese, but I've already made those. Then you have a square that becomes the center, and 4 smaller squares that you've drawn diagonals on, and they are going to be done as corner flips. So this time, remember to put the lines so that they're going not into the corner, but across the corner. Then we'll be sewing right on those lines. So here it is sewn. Magic, I got it sewn. So I've sewn right on the lines this time, so don't forget, don't do it to the sides of the lines like we did the last time. And then what happens is when I turn these up, I'm getting partial part of that square and a square that I want for the center. But before you do anything, what you should do is trim off a 1/4 of an inch outside of that line. So right like that, I'm going to trim it, and I'm not going to cut that one yet, just leave it in case we need to go back and look at anything. I've got my ironing mat up here. So I'm going to iron that out. Again, you can press it just like you did, just like you sewed it, and then lift it out and give it a good press. So there's that part. The next thing that I do is to put the 2 remaining squares in the remaining corners and sew on the line again. When I turn those out, I'll have my square and a square. And here it is. So there's my square and a square. These are not cut oversized. It just doesn't quite really work that way. So I made these, the math in it works to be the right size. So once you have that done, you're really back to the same step that you did in the last block, that we put the flying geese all the way around the outside and the corners of background. And once again, we're going to make it in 3 rows. Now, when you get here, you've got an intersection. So be sure to get that matched up well, because when we open it up, we do want the 2 points to be right up against each other. You're going to do that on all 4 sides. So here's your 3 strips. Press, I think this will probably go best. This one will probably go best pressing out. Well, it's going to be the same thing. So press that in, press that out. Usually, whenever you can press to a square, that works best. So we'll press this out, this in, and then we can put the 3 rows together. Let me just say aside here that a lot of people do like to press open on their on all of their blocks, and that's fine too. It's a little laborious, but many people do it, and it does result in a very flat block. We'll be doing that later on some other blocks that we just can't have all the seam allowance going in the same direction. But for right now, it's fine to press everything one way or the other and not open. So that is block 1B. Again, it should measure when you're done 6.5 inches. So if you're not quite getting it, just try to improve as you go along, because it's going to be easiest to put the whole thing together if everything is 6.5 inches. Okay, I'll see you one more time to do the last block of month 1. We're back at the sewing machine this time for our last block of month 1. And all I'm going to go over this time really is the 9 patch that's in the middle. Your directions tell you to cut 5 of one fabric and 4 of the other fabric that are 1.5 inch squares. And that's how we're going to make our center this time. It's a very small 3.5 inch center. So I want to show you how to sew these together. Now this is really what I call the 9 patch method, where I'm not exactly sewing the top row together and then the bottom and then the middle. I'll show you what I mean here. Let me sit down at the machine. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, and you can use this method for anything, whether you're constructing the last part of the block, you can use it whether you've got 3x3, even things like this, or if you have 4x4, so long as it's sewn in rows and columns, then it's going to work. So what I like to do is to start up here and take the second column, turn it onto the first column, the very top block, and get those nice and even together, and then sew them in my nicest 1/4 inch seam. And then I'm just going to stop with the needle down at the very edge and go to the next row. I'm taking the middle one, putting it on top of the first one, and sewing it. Make sure that's all nice and even. because we certainly want to make a nice 1/4 inch seam, but we also want to be sure that we're holding the fabric even too. Next, the bottom part, the middle one goes on top of the left hand one. Always go directly to your sewing machine so that you know which edge you're supposed to be sewing together. Okay, now I got those done. I'm going to cut, and I'm going to pull those right back in front of me again. So now what I'll do is I'll open the top, add the top of the last column to it. I have everything still attached together. I stop towards the end. I don't go right to the edge, so I can give myself a little bit of room to work. This next one goes on top here. Just nice and even, and then I just continue chain stitching right along that one. And the last. By keeping them all chained together, you keep everything in the right order. And cut. Now what I have are these almost 9 patches. They're just all attached together. What I'll do next is I'm going to cut those. Sorry, I didn't have cutters over here. And if I turn it upside down, this is kind of a way to start training you about which way to press your things. This actually goes like this. Okay, so there's my 9 patch. And in general, I want to press them in opposite directions. So usually I press the top one out if I can. I'm going to press that way. I'm going to press this inward and press that outward. So now I'm working on my pressing mat with my iron, and I wanted to show you a few things here. If I'm not sure, I like to put my pieces on the mat right side down, and then I can determine which way I want to press things. So normally I press toward the square. These are all squares. But my standard way of doing it is to press the top out, the center in, the bottom out. So I've already actually pressed these once, but usually at this juncture, what I do is press them just lightly from the back, just to kind of coax them in the direction that I want them to be. And then I turn them over, keeping the seams in that same direction, and then give it my good press from here. Now I need to press the rows together, and you can see if I put those right sides together, this is, I'm working from the bottom up here, those seams oppose, I can get them to nest right together. I can feel when they are right up against each other. With something this small, I don't really even pin it, but I do hold it tightly and take it over to my machine, stitch it, and then I can do the same with the top one, stitching that on. So when you have that all together, you've got your little 9 patch. It should measure 3.5 inches. You've already made the star points that are flying geese. And then you just need to put the corners in with the little guys. Now, we can use the same method to put this together too. So rather than worrying about stitching these this whole row together, which means you have to stitch and stop and stitch and stop. If we use the 9-patch method, we can turn this piece onto this one, stitch it, turn this one onto this one, and stitch it, this one onto this one, and stitch it. And then we'll have those all attached together, take it out of the machine, and add the final column to it. Okay, then we'll have all of our columns made, all of the rows made, again, easily by chain stitching, and then we can go back and sew the horizontal seams. And that's it. You'll be able to use that in all of your blocks going forward, at least as the final construction. I also wanted to show you here that when I get a major section done like that, this is where I often will use the spray basted. I've got Best Press in my spray bottle here. And what I like about them is I can stand back and just give a little tweet. I'm sure you couldn't even see that. That gives a little mist on it, and then I'm able to press it a final time just to make everything nice and flat and together. You would do the same thing after you got your block together, and then give it that final mist to get a nice, remember, 6.5-inch block. So we have completed month 1. If you need me for anything, you know where to find me, but I'll see you again for month 2.